What's going on, everybody? My name is 302 Birds. I'm Dalton. I am joined here by my guy, Cowboys Beat. You guys know us, of course, from TikTok. But today we got a little treat for you guys. We have something a little bit of fun. Actually, we're bringing you guys our 2023 NFC Power Rankings for all 16 teams. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It sucks that the weekend is almost over, but one thing, if I can inject some positivity before, we will probably be rather positive about our teams, but negative about some other teams. If I can inject some positivity into the stream, one thing that I want people to remember going into this week, I understand Monday, it sucks. It is what it is. There is somebody that wishes that they were in your position right now, going to their crappy job on a Monday morning or going into school on a Monday morning. So understand, be grateful, and yeah, power through the week, set goals for yourself, and achieve them.
Here we go. Here we go. All right. So there's 16 teams in the NFC. There's a lot of teams that are really, I would say, good, not great. I think that the AFC is definitely the team that has a lot of great teams. There's a lot of teams that are on the cusp, a lot of teams that are question marks this year. Starting off, I think you want to go top to bottom or bottom to top. How would you rather do it? I'm good either way.
We can go top to bottom.
All right, cool. So starting at the top, you already know where I'm starting. I mean, look at the room around me. Do you really think I'm not going to say my Philadelphia Eagles? Come on. Hey, seriously. After last year, I have the utmost amount of faith in my team, and I really think that they have a good shot next year to go ahead and go back to the Super Bowl and represent the NFC. There's so many teams, I think, in the NFC that could do it, but I think that the Eagles really do have the best chance. Even looking at their schedule, I mean, I had them going 14-3 next year. And honestly, the only teams that I could see the Eagles losing to are the Bills, the Chiefs, the Jets, and honestly, you guys, I think we could split with too. Now, here's what I would say. That's 4 teams. I think one of them, they'll win one of those games that they shouldn't, whether that be against the Jets, the Chiefs, the Bills, or maybe the Cowboys twice. I don't know. I think at AT&T Stadium, I do think it's going to be very difficult for Philly to win. So I got my Birds at number 1. Tell me what you got.
I'm going to go with the Cowboys, and this might sound like a biased take. The thing is with the Cowboys last year, they were a very good team, but I think that they were missing some pieces, and I think that they did a good job of getting those pieces that I think that they were missing. They're not lacking superstars. When you look at this team, obviously you have Dak. I don't necessarily, he's a borderline superstar, but Micah Parsons, no doubt about it. CD Lamb, no doubt about it. Trayvon Diggs, no doubt about it. Superstars. So to me, they have the main ingredients, but the thing is, they needed to find those complementary pieces that for example, like you guys had Josh Sweat last year. That was a big time contributor. He's not necessarily a superstar, but he's a very important piece to your team. And I think that the Cowboys went out and got guys that are veterans that have been in this league for a long time, that are experienced. And like last year, when you look at the Cowboys, the 3 reasons why they lost games were because teams were targeting the second boundary corner opposite of Trayvon Diggs. They didn't have anybody to really throw the football to outside of CD Lamb, and they had trouble stopping the run. They addressed all those things. They went out and they got Brandon Cooks, who I think is a very legitimate number 2 receiver. They get Stephon Gilmore, who, even if he's not what he once was, you're not asking him to be. Yeah, exactly. You're not asking him to be what he once was. And then you re-sign Jonathan Hankins, who was very important for the Cowboys. Shout out to Big Hank, by the way. He commented on one of my YouTube videos. So
I saw that. That was awesome. Congratulations to you on that. That's really cool that he showed some love.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, man. I'm a big fan of him as a player and as a human too. I think he's a really good dude. And they went out and got Mozzie Smith, who, to me, I consider, like, obviously you have to go into seasons with rookies as being cautiously optimistic due to the fact that we don't know what they are. But the Cowboys, their defensive line remained mostly intact. So if anything, he can really only be an addition rather than a hindrance to their defensive line. So with all those things considered, and due to the fact that I think Philly did get a little worse this year, I'll explain that in my when I talk about Philly. But yeah, I think that's the reason why I think Dallas wins this year. Or well, they're the best team in the NFC, in my personal opinion.
Hey, I totally get it. I mean, they're right there. I mean, I heard what you and Nico were saying on your podcast, and I totally get it. I mean, look at the shirt on your chest. Look at the hat that you're wearing. You're a Cowboys fan. Of course, you're going to be representing your own team. So, if anything, I respect it. We're going to do this as a format of the playoffs. So, it's not that the Eagles would be number 5, in my opinion, or the Cowboys would be number 4 per se. But when we rank them, we're going to do it by playoff slot. So we would do wild card teams, the 3 after we do our top 4 teams. And we can still give our record. So let me ask you, what do you have the Cowboys going next year record-wise?
I got them going 12-5 next year.
Okay. 12-5 next year. It's really funny you said that. You know why? I also had the Dallas Cowboys going 12-5 next year. What teams are you most afraid of? What games are you most excited for? What games do you think the Cowboys could sneak some wins too? I mean, they have a lot of tough opponents next year for sure.
I got us losing to Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. I have us losing that game week 2. I have us losing 1 to you guys. I have us losing 1 to either Miami, the Chargers, or Buffalo. One of those games I think they lose. I think they probably lose a game that they have no business losing, just like every team loses a game that they have no business losing. And yeah, so yeah, about 4. I mean, I would have to go through their schedule one by one, but I mean, that's usually what the last 2 seasons they clocked in at 12-5. I expect them to repeat that this upcoming season.
Okay. I like that too. I mean, they made a lot of good additions, and Brandon Cooks, love that you highlighted that. That guy too, man. Underrated player, is going to fit right in that offense, and I think he's only going to help CeeDee Lamb get more open. I mean, Brandon Cooks is not a bad player by any means too, so it only helps out Dak. It only helps out CeeDee. What I'm interested to see is there's no word on Ezekiel Elliott yet. You guys want no parts of him? Would you guys bring him back? What's the latest on Zeke?
So the latest on him, he actually visited the Patriots this weekend. They're also looking into Dalvin Cook, and there's somebody else that they were looking. I think it was Leonard Fournette that they were looking into as well. I don't think that he resigns in Dallas. I don't see it happening. Me personally, I wouldn't hate it just because I think that Zeke is still a good player. And, the one thing that concerns me about Ezekiel Elliott potentially returning back to the Cowboys would be politics. But I don't think that they would play politics with Ezekiel Elliott due to the fact that Tony Pollard's getting paid $10 million as a running back this upcoming season. They're going to use him a lot. He's going to be the feature back on that team, whether they bring Ezekiel Elliott in or not. So to me, I'd be for it. I wouldn't hate it whatsoever. But again, politics cannot get involved with this. Tony Pollard's the better player at the moment, and he needs to be the featured back.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you too. It's nothing against Zeke. Zeke has contributed a bunch to the Cowboys and to the franchise. It's just one of those things where, like you said, I mean, Tony Pollard is the better running back right now, and I totally get that too. So I'm even as an Eagles fan understanding that perspective. Moving on now to our second.
I'm sorry. Could I get an answer to this? So this past season, because I assume you rooted against the Cowboys in every single game this past season, maybe outside the 49ers game because you wanted to play us. Who were you more afraid when they had the ball in their hands, Ezekiel Elliott or Tony Pollard?
Tony Pollard, no doubt.
Rest in my case. On to the next one.
Exactly. I mean, like his young. I mean, it's no debate, and it's an age thing, and that's why you said it's no politics. It's just a business. And if Zeke doesn't understand that, I'm kind of scared of him. That you brought up the Patriots. Second team though in the NFC. I mean, it wouldn't be the Eagles or the Cowboys. I mean, I had them both up there, but in playoff format, obviously the 49ers are next. I have them going 13-4 next year. Looking at their schedule, I really do. I mean, I think that they're a good team, and even though the fact that they're QB-less, they figured it out last year to get to the NFC Championship. I mean, who's your team? What are your thoughts?
I got San Francisco at number 2 as well, but I have them going 12-5, and here's the reason why. It might not be a popular take, but I actually think that they got worse this past offseason, even though they added Javon Hargrave. And the reason why I believe that is because I think there's a difference between adding talent and adding talent that fits. When we talk about our teams, right? You guys, for example, you guys brought in AJ Brown last year. He wasn't just adding a really good talent. He took that offense to a completely different level because of he was a really good talent, but he was a really good talent that fit what you guys were trying to do. And what are you guys trying to do? You guys are trying to open up the field for your rushing attack. So what does AJ Brown do? Because he's out there now, you have to play. Now you have to take a linebacker out of the box and play another safety. Now he moves those safeties and opens up the field for your rushing attack. So I think that, when you look at it from that perspective, like look at it from the Cowboys perspective, Brandon Cooks, I think that adding him, he's a good player that fits and complements what they're trying to do. Adding a guy like Javon Hargrave, who was their big acquisition, I don't necessarily know if, I don't know how big of a difference that makes for that team, especially when you look at their offensive line. And their offensive line over the past 2 years has gotten worse. I mean, in 2021, it was a very good offensive line. They lose Alex Mack and Laken Tomlinson. And now this year they lose McGlinchey, and they didn't necessarily draft particularly well either. So I'm not as high on San Francisco as other people are. And I mean, I do like the fact that they're getting Brock Purdy back by the beginning of the season. From the looks of it, he is practicing in training camp. But just from a personnel perspective, I don't love the way they look. I really like them as a team, but in terms of the top teams in the NFC, to me, I think Dallas and Philly separate themselves from San Francisco.
I think that, yeah, there's definitely a drop off, and it's because of the quarterback position. If anyone has watched the Netflix documentary, Quarterback, they explain how vital and important the quarterback really is, and it's very much true. I mean, you hear a player like Marcus Mariota, who's been a veteran, no matter if he's a backup or not. I mean, the dude's still in the NFL, and he's still starting games. There's a lot to be said for that, and doing that 6 years. Just saying. You got all these guys behind keyboards that want to, say stuff. But the point is, he said being a starter in the NFL and making these decisions, one decision can change the whole trajectory of a game, which can change the whole trajectory of a season at quarterback. No position in any sport, I think it's fair to say. Maybe a pitcher in baseball is the next closest thing, but I really think the drop-off is big there. So it's very vital, and the fact that the 49ers don't have a QB is why I think it's fair that NFL fans, guys who have been watching the game for so long, are just not confident in them. And I'm honestly glad you're like me with that, because I'm tired of people honestly being like, oh, 49ers this, 49ers this, and patting them on the ass because they don't deserve it. I mean, they don't have a QB. They have a couple good players, and yes, when they're humming, they're great players. But, I mean, they are a hot mess other than that.
And here's the thing with San Francisco that I don't think people take into consideration, and that is, I think San Francisco might have hit their ceiling, their playoff window. I think, when you look at this team ever since 2019, the closest that I think they're going to get to a Super Bowl is that 2019 run. I don't see them winning a Super Bowl within this window. I think they're a very well-coached team. I think they have good personnel. However, and I actually like Brock Purdy. I think that Brock Purdy took that offense to a completely different level, because I think he actually is a much better playmaker than people give him credit for. But when it comes to, I think that there is such a big difference between guys like Jalen and Dak and then Brock Purdy. Now, granted, Brock Purdy did beat us this last season. And look, I understand that definitely. But again, when we talk about it, I think that the Cowboys got better. The San Francisco didn't, I think they beat us by a touchdown this past season, but I think Dallas got much better this offseason. And I think that, if they were to play again in the playoffs, I do really feel confident about our chances.
So I have 49ers fans in here on our TikTok saying that the 49ers are the best roster in football, which is just not true at all. I mean,
no,
not even close. I mean, the first thing and the only thing I'll say, because I know we got to move on, is when you think about that, could you name me a 49ers safety or cornerback off the top of your head? Because I couldn't.
Tufanga, I think he was an All-Pro this past season. He was a rookie.
Yeah.
I don't think he didn't deserve All-Pro though.
It was one of those things where, yeah, somebody goes to the Pro Bowl because somebody else gets injured. And hey, he had a great season, but I mean, just because you have one good year doesn't mean anything. Not saying he won't be good. I'm just saying I'm not sold on him per se.
He's a good player.
Who do you have representing, I guess, either you got the NFC North or the NFC South next? You got either, I have the Lions at 10-7 next.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think that the Lions are probably, I think that they should be the favorites in the NFC North. You look around the division, Justin Fields, by the way, I just want to put this out there, is not going to win MVP. He's not going to be in consideration for MVP. He might improve as a player, but this whole narrative that he could potentially win MVP, it's just not the case. When you look, and I want to go off on just a quick rant about this real quick. When you look at the MVP candidates from last year, who were the four guys that were considered in that race? Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, and Josh Allen. Patrick Mahomes won 14 games. The Chiefs won 14 games. The Eagles won 14 games. I think the Bengals won 12, and I think the Chiefs won the Bills won 13. Are you telling me that the Bears are going to win that many games? No, they're not. So I don't anticipate him being the MVP. I don't anticipate the Bears making the playoffs, and that's just something I wanted to get off my chest. But I do believe that the Lions are the team to beat in the NFC. I like their roster. I think that they're wildly overrated, but just because you're overrated doesn't mean that you're a bad team. I think that they're actually a very well-coached team on both sides of the ball. And in the NFC North, I don't think the Vikings are going to be that good next year because they lost so many players on their defense, and I don't necessarily think they did a good job replacing those guys. And ultimately, I just don't believe in that team. I just don't think that, they have what it takes to go back to back in the NFC North.
I'm with that take. I mean, I think the Bears are the most wildly overrated team right now in the NFC. I mean, Justin Fields is going to be a good player, but just because they got Chase Claypool doesn't make them a good team. Giving up Roquan Smith to net Chase Claypool is not a good move in any means. So I'm glad that we're both in agreement of the Lions right there. I mean, I love Dan Campbell too as a head coach. I think you're right. They're in tip-top shape the way that they're coached. And I got to give Jared Goff a lot of credit, man. I am a Jared Goff hater. I always have been. I just thought that the guy, there wasn't anything about him. He's just there. You know what I mean? And he's another guy that's been around since about 2017. And he's outlasted Carson Wentz. And I got to give him credit for that because when they came in together, I always thought, okay, Carson Wentz will outlast this dude. This dude is unathletic. He's just playing for a good team. But, I mean, I think what he's done in a shitty situation with the Lions, making the best of it and winning over that locker room, I'm all for the Lions going 10-7 this year, and I really I would love to see the Lions make sort of a playoff run.
Yeah, I mean, I think they can. I think that, I mean, depending on who they play, I think they might have a tough matchup because if they're going to be the 3 seed, you're probably either going to play Dallas or Seattle. I think both of those teams are better than Detroit. But I mean, if they make the playoffs, even if they're a first round exit, I think that they should be proud of themselves because they progressed. They're a young team that took a step forward, regardless of what the end result is. If they make the playoffs, I think that that's a successful season for them.
Yeah, I think so too. Number 4, this is where I had the Saints clocking in. I actually had them at 10-7. I mean, I think that the Saints should easily win the NFC South. That division should be theirs. Derek Carr being the veteran that he is, if Michael Thomas is coming back, Alvin Kamara, we haven't heard any reports despite which went on this offseason of him not playing. So I am all for the Saints. And as you know, they're built pretty well on defense, a very underrated team defensively. So I think that the Saints are actually a team that could sort of make some noise and be a 3 seed too. Like I had them at 10-7 and I have Detroit at 10-7. And I think those teams match up very well against each other. Like if they played in the playoffs and the Saints were kind of hot, a 10 or 11 win team, maybe even 9-win team. But Derek Carr's finding his rhythm towards the end of the season, one of those things. Look out for New Orleans.
I'm actually going to push back on you. I think that the Atlanta Falcons win this division. And here's
led by who, though?
But here's the thing, and I'm actually making a video on this, Chris on Football. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure to subscribe. When you look at the way Atlanta built their team, Desmond Ridder, when you watch this kid on tape, it looked rough versus New Orleans in that first game that he played, but he progressively got better and better and better. I don't think that this kid's a big-time talent. I don't think he'll be a big-time quarterback, but at the same time, I don't think they need him to be a big-time quarterback. When you look at the way they built their team, they already had a very solid running back in Tyler Algier. They add Bijan Robinson in the draft. They have Cordell Patterson. They have a good offensive line. They have Drake London on the perimeter. They have Kyle Pitts who can play detached from the line of scrimmage, end line, or even line up out wide if need be. On defense, they add Calais Campbell. They add Jesse Bates at safety. They add Jeff Okudah, who, was a flop in Detroit. But if you're asking this guy to be the second best corner on your team, I think that he's at least adequate in playing that role. So that's the reason why I don't think that I think that there's an exploitable mismatch between Atlanta and New Orleans. And I think that I know that New Orleans is going to struggle against the run this upcoming season, and Atlanta is going to be able to run the ball at a very high level. And I think that when those two teams play, that's going to be the difference between Atlanta winning the division and New Orleans winning it.
Do you know on the schedule? I forgot to look. I want to see where they play late in the season. Like, I do hear what you're saying. I think Ritter is going to be a kid that finds his way with the team, like, slower into the year. And it's actually funny that he replaces Marcus Mariota because he reminds everybody of Marcus Mariota. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think he's sort of a younger version of him. I like your point about the Falcons. I mean, honestly, they're probably my number 2 team. The Panthers, I think a lot of people are sleeping on too. They can make some noise if Stroud finds his way. I just don't think that they're well coached. That's my problem with them. And then the Falcons have a pretty good coach too. I want to say Arthur
Smith. Yeah.
I like him. I have a lot of respect for him. I do see what you're saying, but I mean, it's going to be interesting. So what's your record then for the Atlanta Falcons?
I have them coming in at around 10-7.
Okay. Now number 5. This would be your wild card team. So I would assume here, like me, so I have the Cowboys here at 12-5. I would assume you probably have the Eagles here in your rankings.
Yep. Yeah, I have the Eagles here. Yep.
Okay, now let's talk about that next spot then, because we've talked about both of our teams enough. The New York Giants, Minnesota Vikings, Seahawks, Panthers, and Packers, with a chance of the Atlanta Falcons too, and the Bears, maybe the Rams, but I mean, there's 3 slots. I mean, 2 slots, I should say, after this. Who do you got in that 6th spot?
Do you mind if I just real quick clarify my take on the Eagles? Because I just want to clarify to people the reason why I have them just slightly behind the Cowboys in my ranking. I think that they're the best offense in football, and I think that honestly they're going to win games. A lot of these off the backs of their offense. I think that there's a lot of unproven pieces on defense. So when I look at both of these teams, Jalen Carter could be a really good player. Jordan Davis still has to show that he could be a really good player. Same thing with Dean. Same thing with the safeties. And Sean Desai being the defensive coordinator. There's potential there, but I think ultimately there are exploitable matchups for the Cowboys. And I think that the division's going to come down to those 2 big games that they play against each other. And if it does, I would still feel more inclined with Dallas just because I like the matchup. But again, Philly, great team. And I mean, they certainly have the capability to win it all this upcoming season. But I just wanted to clarify that real quick because I wanted to get that out there.
No, I think that's fair to say. And I'm glad that you took a second to say that too. All fair points. I mean, they're a lot closer than I think a lot of Eagles fans want to admit. And that's for damn sure. I mean, the Cowboys are a very good team from top to bottom. I mean, a lot of these teams are very good teams from top to bottom. And that's kind of where the unknowns are. And that's kind of where biases and opinions come in, is who's coaching. who's a first year, who's going to, maybe flop on their face the first year, who's going to do great their first. There's so many unknowns. But that number 16, who did you have there?
So that's going to go to Seattle.
Really? So you're high on Seattle. Tell me why.
The reason why I like Seattle is because, I do think that they improved over the offseason. I think people are overrating them a little bit. They add Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I think is a high floor, maybe not a high ceiling type of player. They add Devon Witherspoon to go opposite of Tariq Woolen. They add Bobby Wagner, who's still playing at a very high level. And ultimately, I really like their coaching staff. I think that they're one of the most well-coached teams in the league, but I do think that there are some limitations with the team that's going to hold them back. I think I don't love their pass rush. Their offensive line showed some promise last year, but ultimately I'm still a little unsure of that unit for them. Love their safeties with Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams. I think that their offense is really good as well. I mean, you have even though I'm not necessarily on board with them drafting Zach Charbonnet in round 2 of the draft, but I mean, it's very obvious that they want to run the football with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. And, I think that's going to open things up on the perimeter there for arguably maybe the best receiving trio in the game with DK, Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. So, I'm high on Seattle, and maybe not as high as some other people, but I think they're probably going to clock in at about 11 wins.
Okay. Wow. 11?
Yeah, I feel good about 11.
Wow. I have them at like 9 and 8. I think that they'll be good. I mean, I guess, now with the new schedule, I mean, that would be 6 losses. Would it be? Yeah, 6 losses. I mean, which is easily, you got to keep in mind, guys, a lot of these teams and a couple of these teams are going to have pretty easy schedules and end up making some noise too. I actually had the Giants, or I'm sorry, not the Giants. I actually had, I got to get my updated list. I had the Vikings, at 6. I think that they're going to be 10-7. The Vikings are going to do what they do every year. And as much as I hate to say it, and as much as I want it to be different, because I do like Kirk Cousins once again, shout out to the Netflix quarterback documentary. They're just going to be 10-7, though, and a mediocre team and lose in the first wild card round of the playoffs, probably at home. If they win that division, that's usually what's really bad about it is they end up losing at home in their own stadium. They're going to be a team that's going to make a lot of noise during the regular season. Everybody's going to want their players in fantasy football. And then when it comes time to winning clutch games, they're not there.
Yeah. Now, question. I know you're an Eagles fan, but Doc, do you think the conversation between Dak and Kirk Cousins is a fair thing? I think that,
no, not at all. I think that they're 2 different tiers. I think that Kirk Cousins is one of those guys that he's very accurate, but he's not clutch. And you can't really say the same thing about Dak. Dak has been clutch when Dak needs to be clutch. Dak maybe doesn't have the situation around him and uncontrollable things happen around him. You know what I mean? But it's in very rare situations. I don't think I've ever seen any where when, it's time for Dak to make a decision, he's not pushing the right buttons. I mean, Christ. Look at the guy. He came in as a 3rd-round pick and won the job over Tony Romo. So I really, really like Dak Prescott. And Kirk Cousins is good too, but Kirk Cousins, I would say, is like probably, in my opinion, anywhere from like 14 to 16. Whereas Dak, I would say, is probably 11 to 12, maybe 9, that range. I mean, there's a lot of good QBs in the NFL right now. I mean, a lot.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I mean, I think of Dak a little higher just because, like, when it comes just to get off track a little bit, but I think it is a very interesting conversation.
I actually have him at 8. Sorry, I just looked up my ranking. So there you go. I have Dak at 8 in between Lamar's 7 and Trevor's 9. So there you go.
That's very fair. I think that there are I think that when you look at the quarterbacks outside of Patrick Mahomes, there's something that you can tie to them. Like, for example, Joe Burrow and Josh Allen. I have Josh Allen over Joe Burrow. And the reason why is because when you look, if you give Josh Allen, like when you compare their playoff performances, Josh Allen's a better playoff performer than Joe Burrow, and he's gotten less from his team. Like when you look at the defensive points per game for Cincinnati compared to Buffalo, well, yeah, if Buffalo gave up as few points as Cincinnati, Josh Allen would probably have a Super Bowl by this point. And my eyes were open to that. So I think that like when you look at all the quarterbacks outside of Mahomes, you got Allen, Burrow, Rodgers, Jalen, Dak, Herbert, Lamar. All these guys have warts around, like what you would consider warts. With Jalen, it's okay. It's been 1 year and he has a lot of talent around him. With Dak, it's okay. He had the really bad game versus San Francisco. With Herbert, it's, can he be a winning quarterback? With Lamar, it's can he stay healthy and play at a high level consistently? So I think there are a lot of warts around the quarterbacks outside of, I would say, Patrick Mahomes. And it makes for a very interesting conversation because I think that there's a case to be made for pretty much all of these quarterbacks being ranked in a certain area. Now, I think that the list does come down to a certain like 10 or 12 quarterbacks that you can really, shuffle around. But I would say that there's warts around a lot of these quarterbacks.
So they all have, you're right. I'm glad you brought that up. They all have a weakness and something that could be exposed about them per se. And that is 100% true. I mean, they all have one spot except for Mahomes. He's the only guy that you can't really say, okay, there's something not right about this guy. Number 7. Now, this is where I actually put the Giants. Sorry, Colin. 9-8. I do have them having a tiebreaker to get into the playoffs over the Seahawks. I think if you guys play each other next year, which I believe you do, Daniel Jones should win that game. If you guys are saying the quarterback is Daniel Jones as he is, if Daniel Jones just got this big contract, I go ahead and give the Giants the win in that game. Because I'm giving you guys the benefit of the doubt, Giants fans. I'm being a nice guy. Even as an Eagles fan, I'm saying, hey, you know what? You got this, buddy. I know it's been a tough time for you since Odell took that picture on the boat, and you've been suffering. But, I mean, I'm high on the Seahawks. I'm just not as high as you, no pun intended. See what I did there, Seattle. But, I mean, Geno Smith is a good quarterback. But like I said, I will give the Giants the benefit of the doubt and say that when they play the Seahawks, they will win. And with that being said, that'll be their edge to get in the playoffs. Who's your third and final team to make it in the playoffs?
I have the New Orleans Saints here. I think they have a lot of potential if they can stay healthy. Michael Thomas played good football when he was healthy, but the problem is he hasn't been able to stay healthy. Derek Carr, was last year an anomaly for him, or are we starting to see a downwards trajectory to the point where, he's starting to hit that point in his career where it might be time to hang him up? Alvin Kamara, what's going on over there? Can, some players on their defense stay healthy? There's a lot of ifs with New Orleans, which is why I ended up with Atlanta over New Orleans, because I feel more confident in their personnel compared to New Orleans. But I mean, look, it wouldn't surprise me if they can stay healthy and get high level play from, if Derek Carr can replicate what he did in 21 on top of a healthy Michael Thomas, with a Chris Olave who's starting to ascend there, yeah, they could be a team to be reckoned with. But there's just too many ifs for me. But I do think that with their weak schedule and a weak division, being able to play the Bucks 2 times a year, being able to play the Panthers 2 times a year, I think that that's going to help them out. And not only that, I'm pretty sure they play a 3rd place schedule as well. So I think it'll be enough for them. I got them coming in about, I think, 9 or 10 wins.
Okay. I think that I like what you say a lot about them too. Was last year an anomaly? Who knows? The New Orleans Saints are a big question mark. I'm going to go ahead and be a risk taker, though, and say I'm going ahead and banking on them. I guess now at number 8, this is where I have the Seahawks. Is this where you have the Giants then on your list, or?
I either have the Giants. You want to know what? I'm gonna go Minnesota over New York. I'm
That's
gonna go
fair to
Minnesota.
say.
And
Even
here's
with the Giants go ahead and beating them this year in the playoffs at Minnesota's home.
well, I mean, if we're talking about, I don't have either of these teams making the playoffs, and if we're talking about regular season, I feel confident enough in the Minnesota Vikings to put forward a good enough regular season. But my thing with the Giants is, um, I think they have some players on their team. I love Dexter Lawrence. I really like Andrew Thomas. They're going to have a really difficult schedule this upcoming season. I mean, we're playing the AFC East. I don't see them beating the Jets. I don't see them beating the Bills. I don't see them beating the Dolphins. And it's going to be a hard matchup with them and New England. They don't do well against Dallas. They don't do well against Philly. I see a lot of losses on their schedule, and I'm not even necessarily taking a deep dive into what their schedule is. So, like when you look at it like that, I mean, I think that Minnesota is good enough to beat the Bears. I think they probably split with Detroit, maybe. I think they're good enough to beat the Packers. I mean, I might even consider taking the Packers over the Giants.
Wow. Really?
I understand. Look, I love the Giants draft. I think they had a really good draft, but I just look at their schedule and I'm just like, they're not going to beat Dallas or Philly. They're not going to beat Buffalo. They're not going to beat Miami. They're not going to beat uh, New York. I mean, I'll take a look at their schedule. They're not going to beat San Francisco. I don't think they beat Seattle. I mean, there's a lot of games. This is a tough schedule for them. So
Now, I think
I'll go Minnesota at 8.
I love that you're giving Minnesota shit too, because I'm high on Minnesota, but I think Minnesota honestly deserves some clapback too. Because how long has Kirk Cousins been there? And he hasn't underperformed, well, maybe a little bit, but I mean, he goes to the playoffs and then he just chokes. I mean, it's what he does if they make it to the playoffs. I mean, they're usually in contention. They're usually like fantasy football's best friend. They're usually the NFL's biggest advocate when it comes to fantasy offensively. I mean, they create some of the best players, running back and wide receiver wise, statistically ever. But I mean, when it comes time to clutching up, they just kind of suck.
Do you mind, real quick, if we just spend a little more time on this Giants schedule? So I have their schedule pulled up. Dallas versus the Giants. Dallas is going to win that, just because if you guys lose to Cooper Rush, I'm not being biased when I say I have to see you beat us for me to believe that you can beat us. They're going to beat Arizona. They'll lose to the 49ers. I think they lose to Seattle, Miami, Buffalo. They can beat the Commanders. They're not going to beat the Jets. The Raiders, I think that's going to be a tough matchup for them. Dallas, they're not winning that. The Commanders, they can beat them. Patriots, they can beat them. Packers, they can beat them. I don't know if they beat the Saints. I don't think they're not going to beat you guys. They can beat the Rams, and I don't think they're going to beat you guys. I mean, that's a tough schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Giants are a team that Dabble has been Brian Dabble, whatever you want to say. He's been dabbling, and he's been a lot better of a coach for the Giants. I mean, he's been their savior, per se. I'm just not sold on him yet. I feel like the New York Giants are an organization with a big fat rain cloud over them that never ceases to go away. They're just cursed ever since that boat photo. And until they start winning games again, I'm not really sold on them. I mean, their front office has gotten better. I will give them credit on that. That's why I personally have them as my third playoff team at 9-8. I could see them being a 10-win team. There's no way in hell that they're going to win more than 10 games next year. I mean, I looked at that schedule and it's tough. I mean, I think making the playoffs this year actually was a negative thing for the Giants winning that game because their schedule's a lot harder and the NFC is wide open next year. So I think there's going to be one team in the NFC next year, whether that's the Giants, the Seahawks, the Vikings, the Saints, or the Lions. There's going to be one of those 5 teams that's going to catch momentum and is going to be one of the 3 seeds. You know what I mean? And we're going to be like, wow, where'd they come from? I don't know which one it's going to be right now, but I don't think it's going to be the Giants.
I just look at I can't find 9 wins on their schedule. It's dude, this schedule. I mean, they're going
It's
up against.
tough. Do you see what I mean? Like, do you think that winning this year, that playoff game, actually it's kind of a negative benefit because next year's tough for them?
Well, I don't think the playoff win really has anything to do with like their seeding, because I think that, it's more so regular season. This is what I will say. I think, where you can say that playoff win kind of hurt them, but I don't think it did hurt them, was that, there are expectations on them this upcoming season that I don't think are necessarily fair. I think last year, I mean, it was a fantastic coaching job by Dable, and they were able to get a very favorable matchup that first round. But I just don't see it this year. I think if they play any other team in the playoffs outside of maybe Tampa and Minnesota, I don't think they beat Seattle. I don't think they beat San Fran, Dallas, or Philly. I think they got lucky with the Minnesota matchup, and they took advantage of it. But I am coming off like I'm shitting on this team, but I mean, I love their draft. I really like Deontay Banks, love John Michael Schmitz, Jalen Hyatt in the 3rd round. You can't complain about it. I think they're starting to build something towards the future, but I think that this year, from a record perspective, they'll take a step back.
Yeah, I mean, they deserve the respect, but you're right, dude. Like, looking at that schedule, it's tough.
It's every week they're playing a good team.
Yeah. Now we're looking at that number 9 team. I mean, we can kind of talk about some of these teams now and kind of, be quicker because these teams suck. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I think the Panthers are an interesting team to talk about. I have them at 8 and 9 next year. I mean, where do you have them at?
I got them a little further down my list. I think I'm actually on 10 because I had Minnesota at 8 and then New York at 9. I have Green Bay at 10. And the reason why I say this is I think they have a good defense. They have 1st-round picks all on their defense. Like their defense is littered with 1st-round picks. And I think what they did with drafting both Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave, they did draft 2 tight ends in a draft, and people are going to look at them crazy for doing that. But when you look at the type of tight ends that they are, Tucker Kraft is an end line wide type of tight end. Luke Musgrave is a guy who's detached from the line of scrimmage, big slot, can make plays down the field. I think that that's going to help Jordan Love out a lot because he's a catch radius guy with a ton of potential, and young quarterbacks thrive with guys with catch radius. Christian Watson, is he going to take another step? Romeo Dobbs, they have a really good running game. So I think they have some pieces when you squint your eyes on their offense, it's that can do something. And then their defense, like I said, just littered with 1st-round picks. So that's why I have Green Bay at 10.
I like the Packers too. I actually have them at 8 and 9. I mean, I think Jordan Love is going to surprise a lot of people this year. I just think that the Packers organization is very good at actually breeding quarterbacks. They kind of dropped the ball though with Watson. I think that's kind of why Rodgers left. He did develop, but there were a lot of mistakes and a lot of drops in crucial moments. And I think Aaron Rodgers was kind of like, I don't have time for a guy to develop. I think that the Packers could have traded up last year in the draft. And if they would have went out and got like somebody like Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave even, I think that Aaron Rodgers would have stayed in Green Bay. They didn't. They let Davante Adams go. I feel very much bad for Davante Adams, but we're not talking about the AFC because he's the one that kind of got screwed in that situation. His best buddy, Derek Carr, he goes there to play with, and then he's like, deuces. Well, really, the organization is like, deuces. And, that kind of sucks. But, I mean, the Packers, I'm glad you bring that up. They're an underrated team. They still have a very good defense, a great secondary, one of the best secondaries in football. And I think that they could be, once again, a team that makes a lot of noise next year if they get momentum. And they have a pretty favorable schedule too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We should I'll get into number 11 here. I got the Los Angeles Rams, and here's the reason why. They had a rough season last year, no doubt about it. And I don't necessarily think they had a particularly good draft either. But when you have Matt Stafford, who we've seen can play at a top 5 level. I mean, I considered him to be a top 5 quarterback in 2021. Guy won a Super Bowl. You have Cooper Kupp there. I mean, if he's healthy, that could be something there. I shouldn't say I completely hated their draft. They picked up Steve Avila. I think they needed to pick somebody up for that offensive line. Still have Aaron Donald on that team. Lost Bobby Wagner and Jalen Ramsey, so that's going to be something to look out for. But I have to pay some respect to what they could possibly be with Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp. And I mean, to be not even a top 10 in the 10 team in the NFC, I mean, I think that they're at least capable of being the 11th best team in the NFC.
Yeah. I'm glad you bring that up. I mean, I think I'm not high on them next year at all. I'm 5-12 with them next year. I mean, I think that the fact that they lost Jalen Ramsey, I think we're going to see how much of a departure that was this year. Like, not only for the fact that Jalen Ramsey's a good player, but Jalen Ramsey's vocal. He fires the rest of that team up. Bobby Wagner's gone. I mean, no matter what you say, he's a great leader out there. So, I mean, I've already talked about, the Falcons and the Bears, and I know you have too. That's my 12 and my 13. The Bucks, 7 and 10 were my 11. I mean, Mike Evans is really the only bright spot of that team, and he's starting to get older. Chris Godwin's good, but I bet you he'll demand a trade out of there sometime soon. Not this year, but next year probably. The Rams, though, I mean, Matt Stafford coming back. Is Allen Robinson still there, or did he find a new team?
I think he's on the Jets. I'll double check that real quick.
If he's on the Jets, it's game over. That's freaking wild if he's on the Jets. If he's still there, though, that's going to only help out. Huh?
Pittsburgh.
Wow, that Pittsburgh's going to be pretty good this year then.
Yeah.
I might have to move them up in my rankings. That's good to know. Yeah, they're going to be solid this year. Even though he's not, the best receiver, he's still pretty solid. The fact that he departs, though, I just think that it's going to be tough for the Rams to make any noise next year. I don't see it happening.
Yeah. So where are we at now? We're at I'm on 12 on my list. Carolina. I think they have some potential. They have some good young players on their team. I think they have one of the most underrated nose tackles in football, and Derek Brown, excellent player. Got some guys on their offensive line. Bryce Young, we'll have to see what he is. Jonathan Mingo, their second round pick, I think has a very high ceiling. Ole Miss receiver, big body Ole Miss receiver who, as we've seen over the past few years, that big body Ole Miss receivers tend to translate very well into the NFL. Other than that, I mean, I guess I have them at this spot because of the division that they play in, and it's not necessarily a great division. You want me to rapid fire through these next few 13 to 16?
Yeah. Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth with the Panthers. So I was actually interested to see, where do you have the Commandos?
I have them at 14. I have the Bears at 13. I have the Bears at 13 because I do think that they got better. One of my favorite players on your guys' team last year was TJ Edwards. I think he's a fantastic leader for a defense. They add him. They add Tremaine Edmonds. They improved their offensive line by adding Darnell Wright through the draft, who I thought was the best offensive lineman in the draft. They add DJ Moore. They still have Cole Kmet there. I think that they actually have a pretty underrated secondary as well. And I also think that they have some underrated weapons as well. DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney, Chase Claypool. I mean, Chase Claypool is not great, but I mean, he's a number 3 option. You're not going to get, you're not going to get many number 3 options better than him. I mean, granted, wasn't worth the second round pick, but I think that that's good enough to be the 13th best team in the NFC. Washington, I'll get into them real quick. If we're going based on just talent, I might put them in my top 10, to be honest with you. Honestly, like I think that they're a talented football team. They have a question at quarterback. They have a tough schedule, but ultimately, when you look at this team, you have 2 running backs that I really like, Robinson and Gibson. Receivers that are very nice with McLaurin, Dotson, and Curtis Samuel. Defense, really like their defense with Payne, Allen, Sweat, and Young on that front four. It's one of the best defensive lines in the league. And, they add Emmanuel Forbes to that secondary. So, I mean, again, it's one of those teams where you squint and you say, yeah, they're all right. I think they're going to give a lot of teams fits next year, like big time fits. They're not going to be easy. They're not going to be an easy win. I got 15 Arizona. Just go get Marvin Harrison Jr. for Kyler Murray. That's all you got to do next year. That's all you got to do. That is your only goal. Go get Marvin Harrison Jr. because that kid's going to be special. St. Joe's prep graduate, Ohio State player right now. Go Buckeyes. Just go get him. Go get him. You're not going to be a good team next year. And then 16, I have Tampa Bay.
Wow, really?
I don't think they're good at all. I mean, they won 8 games last year, and they lose the greatest quarterback of all time, and they replace him with Baker Mayfield. It's a team that's getting older. The personnel that they have on their team, it's a team that looks like they should air the ball out, but they don't have a good quarterback, and they don't have any running backs, and their offensive line is suspect. I mean, they drafted Cody Mauch in the 2nd round, like the prospect, love Tristan Wirfs. I think he's great. Jensen's still there. So again, it's one of those things where you squint and maybe Baker Mayfield, I think he sucks so much, man. And I don't usually say that about NFL players, but I think he sucks.
No, he's pretty freaking bad. And just his ego and everything that comes along with it. I mean, I get it.
I mean, granted, Arizona, you want to know what? Actually, I'll do a switch here. I got Arizona at 16 and I have Tampa Bay at 15 because of the division that
Thank
they
you.
play. But Baker Mayfield fucking sucks, man.
He's ass cheeks.
He's so bad. He's not good at all, man. Like it was so funny to me that he got upset that the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson. I'm like, look, I understand Deshaun Watson is not a great person, but as a football player, it's not even a comparison. Even with Deshaun Watson having a rough season last year, still take him as my quarterback over Baker Mayfield because I just think he's not good at all.
Any day of the week, I'm totally with that. I mean, just it's a night and day difference. I had the Bucks at 7-10. I mean, I'm with you. The more I think about it, I actually have them as a 5-win team. I'm moving them even further down on my list. But last team for me is the Cardinals at 2-15. They are a dumpster fire. Players wanting to get traded out of there. They somehow figure out, I think, a way, or they're figuring out a way to keep Buda Baker. But, I mean, there's just nothing good about that team. Like, literally, this is my analysis that I have on them. Is there anything positive to say about this team? It's astonishing how they managed to worsen, but I can't say that I'm surprised under Jonathan Gannon's leadership. The Cardinals are honestly in a really bad spot. Their QB seems more interested in playing COD than he seems playing football and excelling on the field. Their star safety wanted out, and on top of all that, they cut one of their best players. I think their best player on offense, the guy that caught the Hail Mary for him a couple years ago, DeAndre Hopkins. So they got really nobody to throw the ball to now. The Cardinals have nothing going for them, and I'd be surprised if they even sniff the playoffs. I mean, they're in a dire state.
One thing I'll say about the Cardinals. So my thing with Jonathan Gannon is this. Didn't like the hire at all. think that there were better candidates out there. But one thing I'll say about the Cardinals is, man, like I don't think they're going to be good this year, but they're going to be in a position where they're going to have the Texans first round pick. Now, I think that the Texans are going to be better than people give them credit for, but they're also going to have their first round pick in a draft that's loaded with quarterbacks. So if they get the first pick, they'll be able to. I don't think that they should move on from Kyler Murray. One, they're paying him too much money. Two, Kyler Murray has proven that he can be a good player and a good quarterback in this league. I think you could win with Kyler Murray, and especially when you look at the fact that you have a wide receiver that could be, maybe the best wide receiver prospect that we've seen in some time. You can continue to improve that offensive line in next year's draft, because there are some guys that can play. Just early scouting with Olu Fashanu from Penn State, Joe Alt from Notre Dame, two guys that I think could be top 10 picks. I think that the future is looking good for them. Next year looks terrible, and it wouldn't surprise me if Jonathan Gannon is out, but it also wouldn't, because Jonathan Gannon, this is his first year. But I mean, it depends. Is he going to be the play caller over there? Is he going to be the defensive play caller? Or is he going to push that off to somebody else? Because if he's just the type of guy that's going to be a culture builder, kind of like Sirianni in a way, where Sirianni doesn't call plays, but he's very good at building a culture, just like Mike McCarthy did in Dallas, where Mike McCarthy didn't call plays, but he was solid at building a culture with that team. If he's doing more so that, then maybe. But I mean, they're not a good football team. There's no other way to say it. And I probably have them around 2 to 4 wins next season, or this season.
There's so many question marks around them, and we'll see. But I mean, that's pretty much all I got for it. I don't know if you got anything else, but I want to thank you for jumping on with me last minute. And if you guys don't on our TikTok, make sure to follow my guy Cowboys Beat on TikTok. And that's all I got. You got anything?
Make sure to follow me on Twitch and Kick as well. I'm starting to do live streams over there. So if you're an Eagles fan watching this and say, hey, I really like this guy, fucking hate his team, but I really like this guy. I think he has some interesting opinions. I don't necessarily talk about football on those platforms. So go follow me over there. If you're a Cowboys fan watching Dalton, I understand, because he is a very charismatic gentleman. So, if you're watching Dalton and not watching me, we're going to have a talk about that, but make sure that you follow me.
Yeah, like he said, make sure you guys follow both of us. I think that this won't be the last time we do this either. I think we're planning on doing the AFC. We'll have to see, but it will definitely get dropped before the season, because like he said, he's grinding on his channel. I'm trying to just do some power rankings on here just for our Eagles fans and NFL fans around. So stay tuned. But yeah, man, that's all I got. If you got anything else, I mean, I'll wrap it up.
I got nothing.